Hello everybody, it's me, Nikki, and today I'm here with some more NetGalley reviews. This time I'm only doing 2 books. I thought maybe that would be not better, but like I could talk about them more, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm still experimenting. So the 2 books I'm going to talk about. Well, the first of the 2 books I'm going to talk about is called The Ravine by... I lost the author. If this will load. It's by Wendy Lower, who wrote Hitler's Furies, which I think I've heard of, but I've never read it. I think I've heard of it though. So The Ravine is about the true story of a photograph showing the murder of a Jewish family by Nazis and Nazi collaborators during World War II. So the image is shown in the book. Since I had a digital edition, it wasn't like zoomed in or anything, even when they did like zoom in parts. So, and it's not a very clear photo, so but it is described in detail, and I would also have a trigger warning for murder, anti-Semitism, wartime atrocities, and anything else that you would associate with the Nazis. It's not really for the faint of heart, so if you do want to read it, but all of that triggers you, I would recommend taking your time with it. And take your time with it even if it doesn't trigger you, because this is hard stuff. So Wendy Lower has done a lot of, not just the Hitler series, but in this book she says that she does a lot with the what is the word that I'm looking for? The Jewish societies that have been brought up since World War II to find missing family members, dead or alive. She's worked with them a lot, and she was looking through some paperwork for something, and somebody brought her this picture, and she had never seen it before, I don't think, but other people had, and you could tell there's a woman, a child, and then the murderers, but she saw the legs of another child. So she was like, that was like the first time anybody ever seen these second pair of children's legs, and she blew up the image as much as she could, and she found out who had taken it, why they'd taken it. Eventually she found out why and where it was from, and this is from Mariupol in the Ukraine. Apparently there's Mariupol is a popular name in the Ukrainian Russian area, so there's lots of different spellings, and it had been falsely labeled under a Mariupol in Russia instead of the Ukraine. So the book covers the history of the city of Mariupol, and as it pertains to Jewish people, and she also talked to some living people, like who were young children at the time, and she eventually was able to put things together about what she thinks happened, and who did what. She even got an archaeologist team out there, and she tried to get the ground or the bodies confirmed so they could be properly taken care of, but I don't think that was able to happen. And apparently there were two mass graves in Mariupol, so they have to be very careful about that as well. So it was hard to read, as it should be, but I thought it was fascinating because this one image means a lot to a lot of different people. And Wendy Lauer even says that studying the Holocaust and photos like these is not even about a historian, it's like forensic detective work. And she does find the man who took the picture, and so he gets a biography, how he managed to save it, and what happened to him afterwards. She interviewed, like I said, people who are still alive from that time, but all their names have been changed because the government in the Ukraine doesn't want to acknowledge anything that non-Nazis did. So it was a lot of the murderers of this image, in this image, were just regular people from the Ukraine who collaborated with the Nazis. And Wendy sadly wasn't able to definitively say who the people in the photograph were, but she has a very good idea, and she contacted the family that she was able to find. So it was a very good book. I would definitely recommend it. And it was just really interesting because there are lots of photos like these, and you know, it's sad that they could be identified definitively. The only people who could be identified, sort of, were the killers, but a lot of them were dead. Or if anything had been looked into, it was filed under a different name, or a city in a different place and not in the Ukraine. And, you know, with the, it was the pre-KGB in a lot of places, but I can't remember what they were called. So a lot of people didn't want to talk because obviously the governments didn't want anyone to talk. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed that, and I actually had to take a break to like really absorb that book before going on to the next one. So yeah, I think everybody should read it, but you know, take your time with it is what I would definitely recommend. And then I didn't know whether to put that one at the end or the beginning, because it's like, do you want to leave on like that note, or like, but like there's a hard transition anyway, so I probably should have just done it by itself. Oh well, still learning. But the next book that I read for NetGalley was Lawmen of the Wild West by Terry C. Treadwell. And it's acting weird. And it was essentially mini biographies again of lawmen of the Wild West, as it were. Now I have to find it. Okay, here we go. And it is about some well-known ones as well as some not well-known lawmen. The first part is an introduction, which has a lot of information about the background of, you know, being a U.S. Marshal, being a sheriff, that kind of stuff, from the 14th century, you know, in Europe until now, basically. It also describes what sheriffs, U.S. Marshals, etc., did in their day-to-day and what they had to deal with. And then there are a ton of pictures of the lawmen and everything associated with them, but also of outlaws that have been killed. There's a couple of lynchings, and there's somebody's head, I think. Yeah, an outlaw got his head cut off. I think it was an outlaw. And put on a pike, and somebody took a picture of that. There's the picture of Joaquin Murrieta's head, if it is his head or not. So I thought that was great. And there's also, like, with the images of the lawmen, it's also images of, groups of lawmen, which I thought was great. You get to see all the different people. So, because one of the things I did like is that a lot of the guys, especially around the time of the Wild West, like Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp were in each other's biographies, or like, they would just pop up in each other's biographies and be like, oh yeah, they were friends, or oh yeah, they met and passed each other by. So that was really fun. And, it talked about, the first person mentioned is Robert Forsyth, who was an early U.S. Marshal after the Revolutionary War, and he was apparently the first to be killed in line of duty. And they talk about Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp and Bass Reeves and Pat Garrett and Seth Bullock and Bat Masterson, But then there's also people like Heck Thompson, Grant Johnson, who else? There's somebody else. A guy with a great name who's I've forgotten, so it couldn't have been that great of a name. But like a lot of them I hadn't heard of. And, within these biographies, it's not just about the men, it's about the historical background of the times, the range wars that a lot of them participated in, and even the outlaws that they had chased down. Who was it? There was a biography where it was like, and then he caught this guy, and then it takes a little tangent about what that guy had done and why the guy had caught him. So, I did like it, but sometimes it was slow. I thought, especially when the stories were being diverted into, like, the range wars and stuff, because that's basically politics, and that just ruined it a little bit for me, but that was the only thing. I also really liked how the book shows that these lawmen weren't just like, a John Wayne movie, where John Wayne is always the good guy, and whoever he's fighting is the bad guy. A lot of these lawmen had an outlaw past, or they became outlaws after or during. They used the badges to gain for themselves. There was one guy who was essentially a shakedown artist, and he goes, because I'm the U.S. Marshal, you should pay me to take care of you. So that didn't work so well for him in the end. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I was a little disappointed that out of 35 individual biographies, only 2 were about people of color, Bass Reeves and who was possibly the first black marshal or lawman, because in the book they talk about how there might have been some before him, but he was the first really recognized badass. Everybody knew him. And Grant Johnson, who was of Native American descent, I can't remember which tribe, but him and Bass were basically best friends, and rode around in Oklahoma Territory, as it was called, dealing with all of that, the tribes. The book even showed the tribal police and some Mexican police because of Texas. But when they showed pictures of like the tribal police, or even of Bass Reeves with other black sheriffs and marshals, I'm like, well, why can't you talk about them as well? So, yeah, that was it. And there is a companion book about Outlaws of the West, so I might have to try that out as well. But yeah, you know, it was a good book. It wasn't, I was expecting, like, because the other mini biographies I read have been, like, snappy, and this one was a little bit not as snappy, but yeah, it was still good. So, yeah, those were the 2 books that I've read for NetGalley. I have more coming up, and, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.